All right. Well, good evening, everyone. It is 6:31 Central Time. We are about a minute late than our usual 6:30 scheduled time, but I hope everyone is doing fairly well. It has been a just I don't even know how to say. Um, it's just hard because sometimes you tell yourself not to watch the news because it's so depressing and all of that. But when you are the news, it's kind of hard to compartmentalize when it's such a tragedy like this. We're talking about what happened in Uvalde. 19 children killed, two teachers. There's 17 that are in the hospital. We learned today that one of the teachers' husbands died of a heart attack. Um, so it's just so hard to process everything. And what's crazy is that these are elementary kids, and I don't have an elementary kid. I have a 5-year-old and 2-year-old. Parents out there, it hits home. You don't have to be a parent for it to really hit you hard. So today, and I've done several topics, several stories on this. And if you remember, I've done stories as well on how to talk to your kids about Ukraine and the war and all of that. And this is a heavier topic, yet it seems like it's the same way that you talk to your children. You don't shield them from any of this. And there's certain ways to talk to your child depending on their age. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in an expert who I'm so excited that she is here today. She's been extremely busy. Dr. Leslie Taylor, thank you so much for being here. And I know that this is such an important topic for you because you're dealing with it every day when it comes to trauma. So, first of all, can you explain what you do with UT Health?
Sure. So we have a specialty clinic that's just for psychological trauma. So for supporting people and treating people with therapies that have been through really traumatic events, especially children and adolescents. And so what we do is a whole bunch of different types of treatments to help them recover from post-traumatic stress symptoms, depression, anxiety, all of those types of things that they may be experiencing after abuse, neglect, a physical trauma, a bad car accident, or a disastrous event like a school shooting.
Um, how do you even, first off, when you found out about this, I know it's your profession, but it just seems like this has hit everyone so hard because there's been this like light that's shined on the fact that this could have been prevented. I don't know if that adds to it, but it's like this mixture of anger and sadness. And I know a lot of you who are commenting right now are saying the same thing. So kind of how did you process it or continue to process it?
Yeah. So, and that's a very valid question, and I think it's one that we have to ask ourselves all too many, all too many, all too often these days. One of the things that really stands out for me is just that the last 2 years have been exceptionally difficult on children and adolescents and families, and even prior to then, things were not so great for kids in terms of their mental health. Lots of feelings of hopelessness and increases in those since the pandemic occurred. And so I think all of those have been contributing factors to some of the events that have happened. That everyone is kind of on, their coping resources are not what they would have been if we weren't coming out of a pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. So how do you go about first off talking to your child about this if this hasn't been brought up in your household yet? Do you bring up the topic first? I mean, or do you just wait?
So I would bring up the topic with them, and I would say it in such a way as, you may have heard some things at school about current events. What are you hearing? What are some of the things that your classmates might be saying? And I realize this is kind of the end of the year, so it's an awkward time to maybe ask those kinds of questions. The school schedule might be a little bit different, but I would ask, be curious with your children. They're a lot more perceptive than you think. They pick up on a lot more things than you might think. See what they're hearing and then have that conversation with them. You can give them appropriate information based on their age and their understanding. And so if children are coming out with things to you like, well, I heard a lot of people got hurt, or I heard it happened in a school, talk with them in a really concrete way about that, and maybe even show them on the map where they are in relation to where the events happened. That might be a protective way to show some distance and increase their sense of safety where they are.
And I just want to, Jonathan Booker, thank you for commenting. You said this was a tough conversation, no matter your role in a child's life, and it's so true. And yesterday, I had a panel of moms, and one of them, it was a teacher, and she was saying something that was so profound to me, just because you, as a parent, you feel like you always have to have the answers to everything, and you can say, sweetheart, I don't know why. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know how this could have happened. And it was very interesting because, the kids pick up our stress and our reactions too. So when one of the mothers I talked to, she said, I was praying and I would pray together, and I prayed for the victims, and I didn't realize that my daughter was right there, son or daughter. And so she had to explain, like, yes, that, there were kids that died. Why did they die? Those are questions that so for a child, let's just say 4, 5, 6 years old, how do you tell them in their minds when they're trying to process just everyday life stuff? How do you communicate that, not to make them even more traumatized?
Sure. So one of the places I would start was to speak to your question about death. And so we know children's understanding of death and loss, and even the way that they grieve, is a lot different than it is in adults. And so part of the conversation, is to be very concrete and honest with them. So saying there were students that died, and that when you die, your heart stops beating and you don't come back to life. That's over. And so we need to be thinking about the families right now and trying to think of ways to support them. And even younger children, maybe not 4, 5, and 6, but older, 8 to 10 or above. Do you want to write, cards to them? Do you want to send things to them? Because a lot of times taking that action can make children feel better or more purposeful in life, and helping and supporting others in the wake of a traumatic event like this.
And it's so parallel to what was being said about when you're talking to your children about the war, because it's like, this is what's happening, but here's how we can help. Maybe we can volunteer at this place, or we can donate or do things. So it's like a learning experience. I just want to make note that it's not just parents that are feeling this. Everybody is feeling this. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to undermine one or the other. This is I think it'll be a whole nother segment on how adults need to process this, because we are all in some way, I forget what the word is. My colleague Caitlin Monty was talking, I think it was vicarious trauma, how vicariously we are taking in stuff, not knowing it, and it affects us, but it doesn't have to affect us at the time, right? Because we're go, go, go. So I'm sure you deal with a lot of that too, right?
Sure. And that's part of, our training, and kind of, what we learn and how to take care of ourselves in order to do the work that we do. And I don't know that other professionals, get that much training in it, and especially school professionals these days. I think that they need it. Other helping professions need it. And vicarious trauma means you're hearing about traumatic events. That's your way that you're being exposed to them, and in that way are experiencing the trauma, or trying to organize how you feel about that particular event. And so it can affect you. And it can lead to burnout, and maybe you feel numb and you don't feel as empathic as you normally would, or you're experiencing symptoms of trauma yourself. So being able to do that kind of monitoring and reflecting, even if it's 5 minutes a day that you're spending with yourself, to see what's going on. I'm not acting like myself. What's happening for me? And then having a recognition of my body's and my brain is still really trying to metabolize and organize all of the, whether it be news or, the work that I'm doing, hearing from other colleagues about what's happening. being able to manage that. And what we know about burnout and a lot of these things where we feel just kind of this emotional fatigue from hearing all the bad news or things that are happening is that connection is what saves us, right? Having a sense of social connection with others, being able to do things that are meaningful for us can be very healing, and make us a lot more hopeful. So if it is giving back to your community in some way, what is that way for you, and how can you do it? Things like
Yeah,
that.
definitely. And I know we're talking about parents here, as parents, but and we talk about us regular adults dealing with how to process this, but I just can't imagine also what it's like for teachers because you know it's crazy because I wonder how teachers feel about this. I know we have a few that are commenting right now, but there's talk about teachers being armed, or you have police officers who are armed to fight criminals, not to protect your classroom. And yesterday when I talked to a teacher who's also a mom, she was saying, I have my keys on my lanyard because I want to make sure if anything happens, I can grab as many children as possible and leave immediately. I don't have to look for my keys or anything. And that's just so sad because, you know, during my time, your time, I'm sure we practiced what tornado drills and like fire drills and stuff. And now your kids are learning other things. So say your child doesn't know about what happened now because they're too young, they're going to know about mass shooting drills or active shooter drills. And I guess what is the conversation you have in order to explain it? And I want to also ask, what happens if you just ignore it?
Okay, so yeah, what is the conversation that you should have?
Mm-hmm.
So connect with the school. If you can, as a parent, connect with the school, connect with the teacher. What is the drill going to be like? What's going to happen? I want to have a conversation with my child prior, if possible, and let them know what to expect so that can help them know, why we're doing this, and I can prepare my child. If that's possible. I know teachers and schools are burdened with so many things today, that it's about, can we have these conversations so everybody feels safe and everyone feels informed? I don't know if ignoring it is the best strategy. Like I said, I think kids are very perceptive about what's going on, and if they don't get accurate information, they have active imagination, so they may believe that something else might happen, or that they're doing it for a reason that has nothing to do with the actual purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And that can lead to more fear, maybe not wanting to go to school. And so it's really important to have a consistent message for them.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I do want to show this graphic that we have. Let me see if I can remove us. No, that didn't work. All right. Well, just talk about this graphic because it's with the, I wanted to zoom in a little bit here. It's with the National Association of School Psychologists. Maybe this would be better if you just have like one of me. There we go. Okay. So can you break this down? Because it is very important that you're talking to them age appropriately.
Yeah. So, more concrete examples for younger children, and just being very clear with them about what's expected of them and why you're doing it. So sometimes as adults, we speak in euphemisms or we use some sort of metaphor or comparison, and it can be confusing. So it can be very helpful to them to provide something that's more concrete. So we keep you as safe as possible at school, but there are times when we need to make plans for if something happens. We're not quite sure what that could be, and that's why we have these plans in place. We have them in place to make you feel safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so with the middle school students, again, like you're able at middle school to have some more abstract thought, and I'm trying to take a look at what you got up here while we're talking. And
Yeah.
so with the middle school students, they're able to think more abstractly. So you want to make some clarifications with them again about, what is actually going to happen, what this is actually going to look like. Will they have access to their phones, things like that, anything that would make them feel safe in that situation. And then with upper, middle, and high, it looks like, being able to report those concerns, how they can get help. There's more autonomy at that age, right? And they're better able to engage in some judgment and decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And so having some parameters around them about what their role is versus what a teacher's role would be in that situation, or the school resource officer, and what that looks like could be really helpful to
And
delineate.
it's so, yes, and thank you for breaking that down. And it's so important nowadays also to be monitoring the social media because, I mean, like in this instance, there were, I mean, he was, saying what he was going to do, not saying that gave enough time for anything because you're not over here monitoring stuff. But how we were talking about the signs, um, I guess, how important is it for you to be monitoring your child's social media and who they are interacting with and what they're seeing?
Sure. And technically, if you're under 13, you shouldn't be on social media, right? Especially, Facebook, any of those things, TikTok, you should not be on them just as per law and policy. And then with older kids, there's apps that like Bark or things like that. One of them is called Bark, where children can actually have their access and what they're looking at monitored by their parents, what they post by their parents. And so I think that's an excellent idea, and you bring up an excellent point, especially in the wake of coming out of a pandemic period. The risk for children to kind of seek online community and online resources without having any context or really knowing what they're accessing. There's a lot of danger there for negative influences.
And a parent might feel, as I guess every parent does about their child, like, my child's not doing anything wrong. I don't want to even, touch on that topic, and they're fine. How many times or how often is it when you're seeing these patients, that conversation comes up about, I didn't know, like, I didn't think this, because I would imagine that it's so surprising to parents that they're totally different at school or in their social media world.
Sure. And that's when it's really easy for me in some cases to be very empathic for the parent. There are parents who are neglectful and they don't really monitor their children. That's a different issue. Most parents care about what's going on with their children, and they try their best, and sometimes things still happen. And so first it's saying, you didn't know. We're going to talk about ways that you can monitor their activity and ways to keep everybody safe. um, Blame and any of us beating ourselves up isn't going to be helpful. Taking responsibility and understanding responsibility is. So, what can we do to keep our children safe? If they didn't know, schools have mechanisms in place and policies about cyberbullying and all kinds of things in place as well, that can really help support everybody in the community in staying safe on social media.
Yeah, definitely. Well, if there's any advice to parents, that, like, I guess the best piece of advice you could give them, what would it be?
Sure. So there's a lot going on right now, and there could have been experiences that you've had in the very recent past that have been extremely upsetting, and all of those reactions are probably more amplified in the wake of this kind of emergency that we're experiencing and the violence that we're experiencing. Those temporary reactions, roll with those emotions, take deep breaths, take 5 minutes to yourself to really reflect, and try to take care of yourself. And if you're starting to feel overwhelmed, reach out for help. There's lots of different places that you can call. There's parenting resources out there. I know we're going to be posting some on our websites, so that everyone has access to them. And giving yourself a little bit of grace, be easy on yourself in the next few days.
Yeah, definitely. Well, whenever you guys do have those resources available, let me know because I'd love to share it with everyone. And I have to tell you, like, just you dealing with, not dealing with, but helping so many patients, that's got to be traumatic to you. Dealing with all the news and stuff, it's traumatic, and you don't. So I would say we have to take time also, and it's like it's everybody does. So no one's alone in this. Like no one's. It's not a weakness. I used to think it was like, oh, no, fine, just keep on going, keep on, and it's like, no, because you're going to burn out or you're going to just not be a better husband, wife, parent, whatever it is, and so um, I would imagine you take time for yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, oxygen mask, the oxygen mask story, right? You got to put yours on before you can put somebody else's
Mm,
on. And so I think that's really important, especially for parents right now, especially for kids right now, that the grief and loss that a lot of us have experienced over the last 2 years have been overwhelming. And this may be something else that makes us feel like it's happening all over again. And so, what are ways that we can connect with others, with our community, to make meaning of what's going on right now? Because that's the way to heal.
definitely. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this important conversation, Dr. Taylor with UT Health. Thank you so much again for your time and expertise. And thank you for joining us on this edition of Parent to Parent. We will continue this conversation. It's important. I hope you know it's important, and I hope you don't ignore any of your own feelings or the feelings your child may have. Um, it's just everything that I've read, everyone that I've spoken with, it's just not a good idea because at some point it just needs to be addressed. So I do hope this helps. And next week, I'm not sure what we're going to do because things kind of got changed this week in light of what happened, but maybe continuing this conversation and maybe highlighting more what adults need to be doing. So thank you again, and we will talk soon.